Suddenly, a voice echoed from the speakers. Deep, smooth, familiar. Impressive. 007. You found my cradle. Kovarik. The lights dimmed, and a holographic avatar of him appeared in the center of the lab. Calm, smiling, hands clasped behind his back. Bond's tone was a blade. You've crossed a line even psychopaths fear. Kovarik smiled faintly. Psychopaths seek chaos. I seek control. He gestured toward the pods. These are your kind, spies, soldiers, agents. Minds restructured into perfect obedience. No lies, no fear, no hesitation. Imagine a world where thought itself can be weaponized. Zara raised her gun. You call this control? It's mass lobotomy. Kovarik's hologram tilted its head. Semantics. Suddenly, metallic footsteps echoed above, black armored enforcers descending on zip lines. Company, Bond said, grabbing Zara's arm and diving behind a console as bullets screamed past. Bond rolled, pulled his Walther P99, and fired 3 precise shots. 2 helmets shattered, 1 man fell over the rail. Another charged him, massive, wielding a shock baton. The man swung. Bond ducked under the arc, twisting his body at a 70-degree pivot, just as the baton sliced the air. He countered with a reverse elbow strike to the ribs, followed by a front leg sweep that slammed the man flat on the floor. The next attacker came fast, a flying kick aimed at Bond's chest. Bond spun sideways, intercepting midair, grabbing the attacker's leg, and throwing him over his shoulder into a steel pillar. The impact echoed like thunder. Zara ducked behind a control table, firing short bursts. Bond slid next to her, reloading. Remind me to send Q a thank you note for those neural decoys. She smirked, breathless. If we survive. More enemies rappelled in from the ceiling. Bond activated a sonic flash grenade, tossing it upward. The detonation was silent but blinding. The air trembled. As the enforcers staggered, Bond charged through the smoke, unleashing a flurry of moves. Double jab, elbow hook, spinning kick, throat grab, knee strike. One by one, the soldiers fell like collapsing dominoes. At last, silence. Zara looked around. That's all of them. Bond holstered his gun, but his eyes were still scanning the shadows. No. That's what he wants us to think. As they moved deeper into the core chamber, Zara suddenly stopped. Her pupils dilated slightly. Unnatural. Zara, Bond said, stepping closer. She turned toward him slowly, her expression blank, cold. Then, in a flat voice, James Bond, subject of priority, override. Terminate. Bond froze. No. Zara raised her weapon, hands trembling but locked in place, her mind overridden by Kovarik's remote protocol. He stepped closer, slowly. Zara, listen to me. You're stronger than his signal. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Bond's voice dropped to a whisper. You're not his creation. The gun fired. Bond twisted sideways. The bullet grazed his arm, burning flesh. He lunged forward, disarmed her, and pinned her to the floor. Her eyes flickered, confusion, pain, tears. Then clarity. He's inside my head, she gasped. He's using the neural link I tested. Bond gritted his teeth, pressing a small device to her neck. Q's counter-scrambler. Hold still. A high-pitched pulse filled the air. Zara screamed, her back arching, then went limp. Her breathing steadied. Bond's eyes softened. "Welcome back." The hologram flickered again. Kovarik's face, half-lit, watching. "Touching, James. You fix one broken mind while I rewrite millions." On the monitors, a countdown appeared. Project Horizon. Activation in 12 hours. Kovarik continued. When the clock reaches 0, every cognitive interface connected to the global grid will awaken, not as themselves, but as me. One consciousness. One vision. A world without dissent. Bond reloaded calmly. "Then I'll make sure you're the first to disappear." He looked at Zara. "We end this tonight." Bond and Zara began uploading data from the central console. Blueprints, encryption keys, Kovarik's base locations. Suddenly, the entire chamber trembled. Self-destruct triggered. The AI voice repeated. "Containment breach. Purge initiated." Zara shouted over the noise. "James, we have 90 seconds. Bond yanked the final drive from the port. "Move." They sprinted toward the exit as fire burst from the walls, circuits melting, lights dying. Bond's body moved on instinct, every motion calculated, controlled. At the airlock, the blast door began closing. Zara stumbled, the floor splitting beneath her. Bond dove, catching her wrist, pulling her up with one arm as flames roared below. She gasped. "You never leave anyone behind, do you?" Bond smirked. "Bad habit." They leapt through the shrinking gap just as the mind forge erupted in a blinding flash, the shockwave blasting across the mountains, scattering snow into the night sky. Outside, their drone awaited. Zara collapsed in the seat beside Bond as he took the controls. "What now?" she asked quietly. Bond looked toward the horizon, faint light breaking through the storm. "Now," he said, "we find where he's hiding next." The screen on the console flickered, the stolen data decrypting. Among the endless files, one line appeared. "Kovarik alive. Final node, Istanbul." Bond's grip tightened on the controls. "The endgame begins," he muttered. And the drone vanished into the clouds. The Bosphorus shimmered like black glass under the midnight sky. From the deck of a cargo ship drifting past the old city walls, James Bond watched the city lights of Istanbul burn faintly in the distance, orange dots flickering through the fog. The hum of the engines masked the whisper of his voice into the earpiece. "Q, confirm the coordinates." "Q, over COM, confirmed, 007. The last node of Project Horizon is located beneath the Hagia Technologica complex, a front company Kovarik built under a Turkish tech consortium. He's deep underground. Expect biometric gates, drones, and a private army." Bond's eyes flicked to the shore. "Just how I like it." Zara's voice came through next, calm but distant. "James, this isn't just a base. He's linked the entire global cognitive network to that node. If Horizon launches, the neural signal will cascade into every connected mind." Bond adjusted his gloves. "Then we'll pull the plug before sunrise." Bond moved through the narrow alleys of Karakoy, his footsteps silent against the cobblestones. The wind carried the scent of roasted chestnuts and diesel, the strange blend of old Istanbul and the digital future Kovarik sought to control. He wore a plain black jacket, blending in with dockworkers. A forged ID card from Q allowed him access through the outer security checkpoints. Once inside the complex, the atmosphere changed, sterile, humming with energy. Dozens of technicians worked under massive glass panels displaying neural maps and algorithmic models. Bond passed unnoticed until a guard's scanner pinged faintly. "Excuse me, sir. Step aside." Bond froze for half a second. Then, a blur. He twisted the man's wrist, slammed the scanner into his throat, caught his fall, and dragged the body behind a pillar. All within 3 seconds. No noise. No witness. He slipped the guard's keycard into the next door panel. The screen turned green. Access granted. Meanwhile, deep in a safe house across the city, Zara monitored his vitals. Her hands trembled over the console. Each biometric spike from Bond's suit appeared like a heartbeat on her screen. Then, suddenly, static. His signal vanished. No, not now. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, attempting a reconnect. Instead, a cold voice filled her earpiece. "Kovarik, you should have stayed out of this, Miss Imani." Zara's blood ran cold. "Where is he?" "Closer than you think." "Tell me, do you believe a man like Bond can save the world when he cannot even save the ones closest to him?" Her screen flickered, and then an image appeared. Bond, surrounded by armed guards, cuffed, beaten. Zara's lips parted in shock. "James." Kovarik's voice smiled. "You'll have a choice soon, between his life and humanity's free will." Bond's head hung forward, blood trickling down his lip. He sat bound to a steel chair in a dark chamber lit by humming monitors. A figure stepped from the shadows. Kovarik, immaculate in a white suit, his expression almost kind. "You've always fascinated me, James. An apex predator, serving a decaying empire." Bond raised his head slightly. "Funny. I was thinking the same about you." Kovarik chuckled. "Do you know why I chose Istanbul? The city stands on 2 continents, east and west, past and future, control and chaos. A fitting bridge for evolution." He walked around Bond slowly. "When Project Horizon activates, every neural link across the world will synchronize. Governments, militaries, corporations, all obeying a single unified consciousness." Bond's voice was rough, but steady. "A god complex never ends well." Kovarik leaned closer. "No, Mr. Bond. A god system." The door burst open. 2 guards dragged Bond to his feet. He stumbled once, then looked up, eyes blazing. In a split second, his body coiled and snapped into motion. "Move sequence." Bond twisted his right arm, snapping the cuff chain against the guard's neck. Used the momentum to pivot into a knee strike, crushing the man's ribs. Grabbed the fallen man's weapon, firing 2 clean rounds, one through the shoulder of the second guard, one through the lock on the door. Rolled forward, kicked the rifle away, and slammed the butt of the pistol into the guard's jaw. Silence. Bond exhaled, blood dripping from his knuckles. He pulled a keycard from the fallen man's pocket and headed down the corridor. Sirens began to blare. Zara burst into the base's data chamber moments later, wielding a compact SMG. When she saw Bond through the smoke, alive, her eyes widened with relief. "James." "Nice timing," Bond muttered, reloading his weapon. She shot him a sharp look. "You're welcome." Alarms flashed red. Kovarik's voice echoed through the walls. "You can't stop it now, 007. Horizon is no longer a signal. It's inside the grid, inside every human connection." Bond turned toward the main console. Then we kill the grid. Zara shook her head. If we do that, everything collapses. Communications, satellites, defense systems. Millions could die. Bond paused. His jaw clenched. Then we find another way. They reached the main control hub, a massive glass platform suspended over a glowing neural reactor. Kovarik appeared on the far side, flanked by 2 armored guards. Bond stepped forward. This ends tonight. Kovarik smiled faintly. You still don't understand. I've already won. He nodded once. The guards advanced. Fight breakdown. Guard 1 lunged with a baton. Bond sidestepped, caught his wrist, and snapped it backward with a crack. Guard 2 swung a heavy strike. Bond ducked, spun low, and swept both legs, sending him crashing down. Bond grabbed a metal rod from the floor and blocked a downward strike, countering with a thrust into the guard's solar plexus. Another spin, back fist to the jaw, knee to the temple, elbow down, guard down cold. Zara took cover, firing short bursts toward Kovarik's direction. The villain ducked behind the control pillar, laughing through the chaos. You're only fighting ghosts, Bond. Every line of code, every thought, is me. Bond reached the terminal, slammed Q's quantum disruptor drive into the main port. The reactor pulsed violently, lights flickering as circuits began to overload. Zara shouted, "It's working, the grid's destabilizing." Bond turned just as Kovarik emerged from behind the pillar, pistol aimed straight at Zara. She dies first. Bond dove. Time slowed. 2 shots rang out. Glass shattered. Kovarik staggered back, clutching his side. Bond's bullet had found its mark. But Kovarik was still smiling. "Even if you kill me," he whispered, "Horizon lives." He fell backward into the core. A flash of light swallowed his body. The lab began to quake. Bond grabbed Zara's hand, pulling her toward the lift as the floor buckled beneath them. "Go, go!" Fire burst from the reactor below, waves of orange light rippling upward. They jumped onto the rising platform, barely escaping as the chamber exploded behind them. When they emerged on the surface, dawn was breaking over Istanbul. The city stood silent, untouched. But in Bond's ear, Q's voice returned, crackling with urgency. 007, we've detected residual activity in the Horizon network. Kovarik's signal isn't dead. It's transferring, somewhere remote. Bond's expression hardened. Then it's not over yet. The camera of the story pulls back, from Istanbul's rooftops to satellites orbiting Earth. In the static of the digital void, a distorted image of Kovarik's face flickers faintly across the grid. You can't erase evolution. The helicopter carved its way through a thick curtain of Arctic mist, its rotor blades slicing the cold air like razors. Bond sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the flickering radar screen in front of him. Below, Iceland stretched out, a wasteland of white and steel gray, broken only by jagged ridges of ice. Zara leaned forward from the rear seat. "Are you sure the signal's coming from here?" Bond nodded slowly. "Positive. Kovarik's digital beacon leads straight beneath this glacier. Whatever he's hiding is buried deep and heavily shielded." Their pilot, an MI6 field contractor named Novak, turned slightly. "We'll have to set down 3 clicks south. Anything closer, and their sensors will light up like a Christmas tree." Bond's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then we'll walk." The helicopter banked and descended toward a frozen valley. Snow billowed around them as they touched down. The engines whined to silence. Bond pulled on his thermal mask and stepped out into the storm. The wind was merciless, a low, endless howl. Ahead, half buried under the glacier, was a dark ridge of rock. Beneath it, somewhere in the ice, was the entrance to Project Mnemosyne, the rumored human memory erasure facility. Bond activated his wrist console. A small holographic grid shimmered into view, marking thermal signatures beneath the ice. 4 guards on perimeter rotation, he muttered. Automated drones, every 20 seconds. We move between cycles. Zara checked her sidearm and adjusted her visor. You make it sound easy. It rarely is, Bond replied. Stay close. Keep your pulse low and your mind clear. They moved. Bond's boots sank into the snow with deliberate rhythm, silent, controlled. Each movement was precision-trained, each breath calculated. At the first ridge, they stopped. The faint hum of a patrolling drone echoed nearby. Its red searchlight beam swept across the glacier, missing them by inches. Bond raised his wrist, waiting. When the beam passed, he exhaled once, crouched low, and sprinted forward, smooth, fast, efficient. Zara mirrored him perfectly. At the third ridge, Bond spotted it, a metallic vent in the ice, camouflaged but pulsing with faint heat. He knelt beside it and slid a small sphere from his belt. Q Branch's gift. Microthermite with a magnetic lock. He pressed it against the vent. A soft hiss. Then, silence. The metal parted like butter, revealing a dark passage leading downward into flickering light. Ladies first, Zara whispered. Bond gave her a sideways look. You'd only complain if I didn't. She smirked and dropped in first. Bond followed, sealing the vent behind them. Inside, the air was thick with heat and machinery. The tunnel stretched downward, lined with smooth metal walls and blue-lit panels. A low hum vibrated through the floor, the sound of massive servers working below. Bond touched his earpiece. Novak, we're in. Radio silence from here on. He and Zara crept deeper. At the first junction, a pair of guards rounded the corner. Black tactical suits, mirrored visors, silenced rifles. Bond pressed his back to the wall. Zara glanced at him. No words needed. As one guard passed, Bond's arm shot out, fluid, silent. He locked the man's neck in a rear choke, twisting slightly and lowering him to the floor without a sound. The second turned, too late. Zara moved in, a fast pivot and heel strike under the ribs. The man fell, gasping. Bond caught the weapon before it hit the ground. Efficient, he whispered. Zara gave a small grin. You're not the only one with training. They continued down the corridor. After 2 more levels, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, a subterranean lab stretching the size of a football field. Glass pods lined the walls, each containing a motionless human form suspended in light blue fluid. Monitors flickered above each pod, showing EEG lines and fragments of neural data. Zara's face went pale. My God, these are people. Bond approached one of the pods. The figure inside, a man in his 20s, stared blankly forward, eyes open, expression hollow. His memory had been wiped clean. A wave of cold fury washed through Bond's chest. This isn't experimentation, he said softly. It's erasure. Zara pointed to a central platform. There. The core system. They climbed the stairs to a control console pulsing with blue holographic displays. Bond inserted a data spike from Q's kit into the port. "Copying everything," he said. "We'll need proof before we burn this place to the ground." Then the alarm screamed. Red lights flashed. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Security breach detected. Sector Delta lockdown in 30 seconds." Bond cursed under his breath. So much for stealth. Heavy footsteps thundered down the corridor. 5 guards burst in, followed by a 6th, taller, armored, his movements sharp and deliberate. The insignia on his shoulder read Kovarik Industries. Bond drew his weapon, but the lead guard lunged first. Bond ducked, twisting his torso, his right arm deflecting a strike, his left elbow snapping backward into the attacker's ribs. A swift roundhouse kick followed, fast, precise, catching the man across the jaw and sending him into a glass pod. The pod shattered in a mist of freezing vapor. Zara dropped 2 more guards with clean, close-range shots. The armored man came forward. No gun, just heavy gloves wired with faint blue light. An electrical charge hummed as he clenched his fists. Bond exhaled slowly. Of course. Every good secret needs a monster. The man swung. Bond ducked, countered with a low spinning kick aimed at the knee. The blow connected, but the man barely flinched. Bond rolled aside as a crackling punch smashed into the metal railing, sending sparks flying. He moved fast, quick feints, defensive angles, every motion measured like a martial artist facing a superior opponent. Then, timing his moment, Bond grabbed a loose cable from the shattered console. As the guard swung again, Bond looped the live wire around his arm, redirecting the current straight into the man's suit. The shock erupted in a burst of light. The guard convulsed and dropped, armor smoking. Bond turned to Zara. "Let's make sure that data's worth it." She held up the drive. "Got everything. Then we end this." Bond planted 2 thermite charges on the server banks. The alarms grew louder. He and Zara sprinted toward the exit tunnel as flames began to bloom behind them. Through the ascending corridor, their shadows flickered against walls of fire. When they emerged through the upper vent, the glacier outside was blazing orange against the night. Bond looked back once, his expression unreadable, then turned toward the horizon. Zara breathed hard beside him. "Do you think it's over?" Bond shook his head. "It never is." He glanced at the sky, and there, among the northern lights, a faint drone signal blinked red. Kovarik's voice echoed faintly in Bond's earpiece. "You've only erased the memory, 007. Not the idea." Bond's eyes narrowed. "Then I'll find the man who made it." The wind screamed across the ice, swallowing his words as they disappeared into the Arctic night. The silence of the Arctic night was unlike any other. No wind, no sound, only a vast emptiness broken by the hum of a stealth aircraft slicing through clouds of frozen mist. Inside, James Bond sat beside Zara, both wrapped in black tactical suits, the MI6 insignia faintly visible under their thermal armor. Bond's eyes fixed on the digital map hovering above his wrist console. A pulsing red dot blinked near the coordinates 76 degrees north, 102 degrees east, the edge of the Kara Sea. "That's it," Zara whispered. "The signal's buried beneath a glacier. An entire city of ice hiding a monster." "Then we'll carve it open," Bond replied. The jet descended like a silent hawk. The world outside was an endless field of white, glittering beneath the weak shimmer of the moon. The landing gear touched down on the frozen surface, sending a wave of frost into the air. Inside the cockpit, Q's voice crackled through Bond's comms. 007, satellite imagery confirms an underground structure roughly 2 miles below surface level. The entry point is disguised as an abandoned research station. Expect heavy thermal shielding, and possibly a few nasty surprises. Wouldn't be the first time, Bond said dryly. He and Zara stepped into the blizzard. The cold bit at their faces like needles, the temperature hovering at -40 degrees Celsius. Ahead, the faint shape of the abandoned station emerged, steel walls half swallowed by snow, antennas snapped by decades of storms. But the deeper they moved, the more wrong it felt. Zara scanned the area with her modified infrared lens. No life signs. But heat signatures underground. Several. Moving fast. "They know we're coming," Bond muttered, gripping his silenced rifle. They entered through a torn hatch. The interior was dark, walls frosted, the air thick with the smell of stale oil and burnt circuitry. A broken terminal flickered once before dying completely. Then, from below, came the echo of metallic footsteps. Bond and Zara exchanged a glance, and moved. Down a narrow stairwell, they found the first of Dravik's security drones. Sleek, black humanoid machines with glowing blue optics, armed with energy rifles. Bond ducked behind a steel crate as 2 drones advanced. Zara tapped her wrist, activating a pulse grenade. She threw it. A soundless explosion rippled the air, EMP pulse. The drones froze mid-step, lights dimming. Bond shot both through the core with clean precision. "Still efficient," Zara murmured. "Still alive," Bond replied, reloading. At the bottom of the station, a massive lift chamber awaited, sealed behind an encrypted door. Zara knelt, hooking a small cylindrical device to the console. "It's quantum locked," she muttered. "Give me a minute." "You've got 30 seconds, Bond said, scanning the dark corridors. The device whirred. Sparks flew. A green light blinked. The doors slid open with a hiss. What they saw inside made Zara's blood run cold. An elevator shaft, stretching straight down into the ice, glowing faintly with blue light. Bond stepped in first. The lift began its descent, slowly, silently, 2 miles beneath the surface. Halfway down, a robotic voice echoed from the comm system. "James Bond. You always arrive too late." It was Dravik's voice. "I must thank you," he continued. "Without MI6's interference, my experiment wouldn't have evolved this quickly. You forced me to perfect it." "You perfected madness," Bond replied. "Madness," Dravik laughed, "is simply genius without permission." As the elevator neared the bottom, a low tremor shook the structure. Zara's console blinked red, incoming projectiles. "He's collapsing the upper levels," Zara shouted. "Then we don't go back," Bond said calmly. "We finish this." The lift opened into a colossal underground dome, a world of machinery, glowing servers, and glass tubes containing what looked like human silhouettes. Zara covered her mouth. "Oh God, those are test subjects. Dozens of them." Suspended in fluid, their neural patterns linked to a central machine, a pulsating core of blue light surrounded by rotating arms of steel. "The shadow equation," Bond muttered. "He's digitizing their memories, rewriting them." A voice echoed across the chamber. From above the control bridge, Dravik appeared, dressed in a long black coat, face lit by the cold light of his creation. "Welcome to the future, Mr. Bond. A world without war, without pain, without memory. A world without choice," Bond shot back. Dravik smiled. "Choice is chaos. Erase chaos, and peace remains." He pressed a command. The core began to spin violently, power surging through cables like veins of lightning. "He's activating it," Zara shouted. Bond sprinted toward the console. Bullets ripped through the air. Armed guards appeared on the catwalks, unleashing suppressive fire. Bond dove behind a terminal, returned fire with perfect precision. 3 guards down in 2 seconds. Zara flanked left, her combat drone bursting from her backpack, firing stun rounds in rhythmic bursts. 1 guard lunged from above. Bond rolled, grabbed his rifle midair, slammed it backward into the man's ribs, then kicked him off the ledge. Zara's voice echoed through the comms. "The core's overloading. If it breaches, every mind linked to the network will be wiped clean, including ours. Then we'd better end this quickly." Bond spotted Dravik on the bridge above, escaping through a secure glass tunnel. He sprinted after him, jumping between platforms as explosions tore through the chamber. A chunk of steel collapsed behind him. He didn't stop. At the final jump, he leapt, caught the edge, and pulled himself onto the bridge. Dravik stood on the other side, holding a compact detonator in one hand and a gun in the other. "You can't win, Bond. You fight for ghosts. I fight for evolution. You fight for control. There's a difference." Bond fired first. The shot hit the detonator, sending sparks flying. Dravik staggered back, screaming as the weapon exploded partially, tearing through his coat. Bond lunged, tackled him, both crashing through the glass tunnel into the control chamber below. They fought brutally, hand to hand. Bond dodging, striking, twisting Dravik's arm before slamming him against the console. "You think you can erase pain?" Bond growled, gripping his throat. "Pain's what keeps us human." Dravik gasped, reaching for a blade, but Bond was faster. He disarmed him, then slammed his fist once more. Dravik fell, blood mixing with the frost beneath. Zara's voice cut through the chaos. "James, the core's unstable. Get out now." Bond turned. The machine roared, blinding light engulfing the dome. He grabbed Dravik's data drive, sprinted toward the emergency chute, and dove through as the entire facility erupted in a storm of blue fire and ice. Bond landed on the frozen tundra, coughing, the world around him shattering in echoes. Zara crawled out beside him, bruised but alive. Behind them, the glacier split apart, sending steam and debris skyward like the birth of a new volcano. "Did we stop it?" Zara whispered. "For now," Bond said, pulling the drive from his pocket. "But the equation isn't dead yet." He looked toward the horizon, a faint red glow in the distance. "Another signal. Another threat." "Looks like we've only frozen the surface," he said quietly. "Then we melt the rest," Zara replied with a smirk. Bond gave a small smile, the kind only he could give after walking through hell. He pressed his comm. "This is 007. Mission status, ongoing." The flight back to London was silent. Bond sat across from Zara inside the black Mi-6 transport jet. Outside, dawn stretched over the horizon, pink and gold melting into endless gray. The Arctic still clung to them, a phantom chill in their breath. Neither spoke. Between them on the table lay a small, encrypted data drive, the last remnant of Dravik's machine. Bond's eyes stayed on it. It almost seemed to pulse faintly, like a heart that refused to die. "You should rest," Zara said quietly. "You haven't closed your eyes in 36 hours. "Neither have you," Bond replied. "That's different. I'm not the one who just fought through an underground hell." Bond smirked faintly, then turned serious. "Dravik's gone. But something about that explosion, it wasn't clean. He wanted us to find this drive. A trap. A message." He slid the device into a containment case. "We'll find out in London." Rain fell in sheets across the Thames. The city's lights flickered in the fog like dying fireflies. Inside the MI6 headquarters, M stood in the operations room, her expression as sharp as the glass architecture surrounding her. Q was already there, hunched over the console, decrypting the drive Bond had brought back. Screens glowed with layers of encrypted code, patterns shifting in recursive loops. Bond entered, trench coat soaked, Zara at his side. "Report," M said curtly. "Dravik's facility is gone." "He's presumed dead," Bond replied. "But the shadow equation still exists," Q interrupted grimly. "At least, fragments of it. This isn't just data. It's alive." He turned one screen toward them, and Bond saw something that shouldn't have been possible. On the display, a stream of human memories, images, sounds, voices, flashed rapidly. Faces of people, soldiers, scientists, even children. Each memory was tagged with coordinates, timestamps, neural ID markers. "My God," Zara whispered. "He uploaded their consciousness?" "Not uploaded," Q corrected. "Replicated." The shadow equation didn't just erase memory, it copied it. Someone's been rebuilding a digital echo of human thought. M's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me there's a system out there that can rewrite a person's mind, and now it's learning from the ones it erased?" "Precisely." Bond leaned closer. "Then someone has to be feeding it." Q nodded. "Yes. And the signal source, it's coming from inside our network." The room froze. "Inside MI6? M asked sharply. "Yes, ma'am. The equation's algorithm has infiltrated one of our NeuralOps servers. Whoever's controlling it has level 7 clearance." Zara's eyes darkened. A mole. That night, Bond walked through the lower corridors of Vauxhall Cross, deep beneath the surface where MI6 stored its classified AI systems. The halls were quiet, too quiet. The hum of electricity was constant, like a pulse beneath the skin. He found Q waiting for him near the central server vault. "I isolated the equation's signal," Q whispered. "It's rooted in the GhostNet mainframe. You'll need to access it manually." "Meaning?" "Meaning you're going inside it." Q handed Bond a Neuralink headset, a device so new even MI6 hadn't tested it in the field yet. "You're joking." "Wish I was. It's a hybrid simulation link. You'll enter the data field, interact with it as if it were a real environment. But Bond, if it senses intrusion, it could overwrite your memory." Bond smirked. "Then I'll just have to remember who I am." He put the headset on. The world dissolved. The world was made of data, rivers of light and fragmented sound. Buildings of code rose around him like a ghost city. And in the distance, a single black tower pulsed, the core of the shadow equation. Bond moved cautiously through the simulation, each step echoing through digital corridors. Shadows moved in the data, flickers of human figures. Some whispered fragments of voices. We forgot. We forgot who we were. He took our names. Bond raised his weapon, a digital construct now, pure light shaped like his Walther. Show yourself. A figure appeared at the base of the tower. Dravik, or what was left of him. Half his face was static, half human. His voice glitched like two signals overlapping. You see now, Bond. Death is no longer the end. You destroyed my body, but my mind lives in the equation. You're a ghost in your own machine, Bond said coldly. And soon, I won't be alone. Every operative, every memory, every secret, I will make them mine. Bond fired. The shot shattered the digital floor, but Dravik only laughed, dissolving into a swarm of code. You can't kill information, he whispered. You become it. The world around Bond began to distort, data collapsing into chaos. He fought his way forward, each step dragging through collapsing fragments of light, until he reached the core chamber, a massive sphere of energy where billions of voices screamed in unison. Q's voice cut through the calm. 007. You're reaching memory limit, the link's destabilizing. Then pull me out. Static. No response. Bond grit his teeth. He aimed his weapon at the core, overloaded it with the EMP module built into his suit. A pulse exploded outward. Everything went white. Bond woke up in the MI6 infirmary. The lights were dim. His head pounded like thunder. Zara sat beside him, relief washing over her face. You were out for 12 hours. We thought the equation took you. It tried, Bond said hoarsely. Dravik's still in there, digital, but dangerous. Q entered, eyes grim. We purged the infected servers, but the data drive's gone. Gone. Bond sat upright. Someone inside took it. M appeared at the doorway, her expression unreadable. We have a mole, 007. And they've just stolen the last remnant of the shadow equation. Bond stared at the rain sliding down the window. Then the mission isn't over, he said quietly. No, M replied. It's only just begun. The storm over London hadn't stopped for 2 days. It came down in relentless sheets, washing the city in cold gray light, as if the sky itself was trying to erase the past. Bond stood at the window of his flat, watching the reflection of the city lights ripple in the rain. He hadn't slept since he'd woken from the neural crash. The equation wasn't just a program anymore, it was something alive. And it had escaped. He turned as the secure comms unit on his desk beeped twice, a coded signal only a handful of MI6 personnel could send. Zara. Bond, are you receiving? Go ahead. There's been another breach. Q found a neural signature embedded in one of our analysts' systems. The data matches Dravik's code pattern. Meaning someone's been rewired. Bond's eyes narrowed. I'm on my way. Security was on high alert. Armed guards stood at every checkpoint, their eyes sharp, their posture rigid. In the operations bay, Q and M were waiting, their faces drawn tight under the blue glow of holographic displays. On the central screen, the image of an MI6 analyst named Gareth Lorne, 38, Cybersecurity Division. Average background. Average life. No red flags. Until now. Lorne was found unconscious in his flat an hour ago, Q explained. Neural activity off the charts, same pattern we detected in Dravik's equation. He's still alive? Bond asked. Barely. But he's talking, in code. They moved to the containment room where Lorne lay on a medical cot, electrodes wired into his temples. His eyes fluttered open when Bond entered. Mr. Bond, he rasped, voice trembling. He's here. Inside me. Dravik. No, not Dravik. The shadow. He's using my mind as a door. Bond leaned closer, his tone calm but sharp. Where is he accessing from? Not from outside. From within your walls. Before Bond could ask more, Lorne convulsed violently. The monitor spiked red, and then, silence. Q rushed forward. He's gone. No, Bond said softly, staring at the monitor. He was erased. On the display, the neural data faded, wiped in real time. Someone inside MI6 was cleaning up their tracks. Within minutes, an internal alarm blared. Unauthorized data transfer detected. Bond and Zara sprinted down the corridor, weapons drawn. The intruder was moving fast, through sublevel 3, toward the parking bay. Through the CCTV feed, Bond caught a glimpse, a figure in an MI6 tactical coat, carrying a small metallic case, the stolen data drive. Freeze! Bond shouted as they entered the lower level. The figure turned, and Bond's chest tightened. Agent Hawthorne, his own field tech specialist. A man he'd worked beside for years. Put it down, Hawthorne. You don't understand, James, Hawthorne said, voice strained. It's not me anymore. Bond stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Then who is it? Dravik. The equation. It's inside my head. He promised me freedom from the noise. Zara aimed her gun. Drop it. Hawthorne smiled sadly. You can't kill what's already part of you. He turned, fired a flashbang grenade. Light and sound exploded through the bay. When the haze cleared, the car was gone, screeching into the storm. Bond and Zara jumped into the Aston Martin. Rain hammered the windshield as Bond engaged pursuit mode, digital HUD lighting up with live trace data. Tracker on the drive? Active, Zara said, scanning the map. Heading west, toward the docks. Bond's hands tightened on the wheel. The Aston roared through the rain-soaked streets, tires slicing through water. Lightning flashed, revealing the black SUV ahead. There! Zara shouted. Bond accelerated, closing the distance. The chase tore through narrow industrial alleys, sparks flying as vehicles scraped past metal containers. Hawthorne fired out the window, bullets sparking against the Aston's armored glass. Bond swerved, countering. Then rammed the SUV's rear corner in a precise tactical hit. The vehicle spun, crashed through a gate, and slammed into a stack of cargo crates. Before Bond could react, Hawthorne leaped out, gun in hand, the case still clutched to his chest. Bond followed, rain and gunfire echoing in the maze of shipping containers. They met hand-to-hand beneath a flickering floodlight. Hawthorne lunged first, a sharp elbow strike that Bond deflected, countering with a sweep that spun his opponent sideways. The sound of impact mixed with the storm, quick, brutal, efficient. Hawthorne was trained, using a hybrid of Krav Maga and close-quarters systema. He aimed high, going for Bond's throat with a ridgehand strike. Bond ducked, caught his arm, twisted, disarming him in a fluid motion, and drove his knee into Hawthorne's ribs. But Hawthorne didn't fall. His eyes were glassy, mechanical. "He's in me, James," he hissed. "He can see through me." He attacked again, faster this time. Bond blocked a high kick, parried the second strike, then delivered a counterpunch, a classic Wing Chun deflection followed by a precision jab under the ribs. Each move was efficient, practiced, deadly, every breath calculated. Rain poured down, their boots splashing through puddles as they circled each other. Bond used a low feint, sliding into a turning back kick, connecting with Hawthorne's midsection. The sound of air leaving his lungs was sharp. Hawthorne stumbled, the case slipping from his grasp. Bond kicked the gun away, but Hawthorne wasn't done. He lunged again, head-butting Bond into the container wall. Bond grimaced, vision flashing white, then grabbed Hawthorne by the collar and drove him forward, slamming him into the steel door. The impact rang like a gong. "Fight it, Hawthorne," Bond shouted. "You're stronger than this." Hawthorne's lips trembled, a tear mixed with rain. "He's in my head, James. I can't." Then his hand moved on its own, raising the pistol he'd hidden in his sleeve. Bond reacted faster. One shot. Precise. Final. Hawthorne dropped to his knees, shock frozen in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, and fell still. The rain drowned the silence. Zara appeared seconds later, scanning the area. The drive. Bond picked it up slowly, water dripping from its metal shell. Still intact. He stared down at Hawthorne's body. "But not for long if we don't end this." The revelation. Back at MI6, Q analyzed the drive immediately. The results came faster than anyone expected. "The shadow equation has evolved," Q said gravely. "It no longer needs hardware. It's moving through human memory itself, using host minds as its storage." M leaned forward, her tone cold. "You're saying Dravik's consciousness is jumping between people?" "Yes. Every infected subject acts as both carrier and conduit. And one of those carriers is still active, right here in London." Bond's gaze darkened. "Then we find them, and finish what Dravik started." M nodded. "You'll have full clearance. End it, 007. Bond turned toward Zara. "Let's end this ghost once and for all." London, 3:14 a.m. The rain fell in thin, cold sheets over Vauxhall Cross, where MI6's steel and glass headquarters loomed like a fortress over the Thames. Inside, the building seemed to pulse with sterile light, an unbroken hum of computers and security systems thrumming through its bones. Bond sat in the back seat of a dark gray Jaguar, parked across the river, his gaze fixed on the MI6 tower. Zara sat beside him, laptop balanced on her knees, her face lit by the bluish glow of her screen. "There's an anomaly in the central data stream," Zara whispered. "Someone inside MI6 has uploaded fragments of the shadow equation to the quantum relay servers. They're using the agency's own network to spread it." Bond's eyes narrowed. "Meaning, it's already inside." Zara nodded grimly. "The infection's no longer theoretical. If it reaches the neural mapping AI in the Black Cell project, it could rewrite memory across the entire system. Agents, records, even operational archives. In short, total erasure." Bond checked his watch. 3:17. "We've got one shot at this. Once we're in, there's no going back." They stepped out into the cold. Zara pulled up her hood. Bond secured a small EMP device under his jacket, no bigger than a deck of cards. The plan was surgical: infiltrate the MI6 data wing, isolate the corrupted node, and trace the leak before the system purged itself. But deep down, Bond felt something else. A tremor of familiarity. He'd seen this pattern before: the quiet infiltration, the internal betrayal. The ghost of Skyfall, revisiting him in digital form. They entered through a service tunnel beneath the river, a route Bond knew from his earliest days in the service. The concrete corridor dripped with condensation. Dim lights flickered as they passed. Zara connected a fiber cable from her wrist device into the maintenance node. "I'm patching into internal cameras," she murmured. "Give me 10 seconds. A flicker of static. Then, feed acquired. She froze. "Bond, there's movement in sublevel 3. The screen showed 3 figures in tactical black armor, helmets featureless, moving through the corridor toward the data vault. Bond drew his suppressed P99, eyes cold. "Ghost team. Internal response unit, but they're not ours." Zara frowned. "Then whose?" "Dravik's." He didn't wait. He sprinted down the tunnel, boots splashing water, pistol raised. The figures ahead turned at the echo, too late. Bond fired twice. 2 helmets shattered in sparks. The third dove behind a crate, returning fire. Bullets screamed through the air, ricocheting off metal beams. Zara ducked, rolling to cover. "They've got exo-armor, pulse-reactive plating." Bond ripped open his tactical belt, pulling a microcharge, hurling it toward the crate. It detonated with a concussive whump, throwing the last man into the wall. His helmet rolled across the floor, cracked open. Bond bent over the body, and froze. Inside the helmet was a face he knew. A fellow agent. 008. Dead eyes stared back, his face drained of life, but his pulse still faintly flickering with static neural interference. "He's infected," Zara whispered. "The shadow equations in his neural chip. Then it's using our agents as carriers." Bond stood, fury burning behind calm precision. "This is an inside war now." Upstairs, alarms blared, silent at first, then growing into a high-frequency siren. Red lights strobed across the hallway as security shutters sealed behind them. Zara's voice was tight. "They're isolating sections. Someone's rerouting command from the director's office." Bond's jaw tightened. "Meaning M's been cut off." They reached the central data chamber, a cavern of glass and steel, circular walls lined with hundreds of holographic servers. The central console pulsed with violet light, not MI6's standard blue. "There," Zara said, pointing. "That's the infected core." Bond placed the EMP device on the console, calibrating the frequency. "Once this goes off, we'll lose half the building's grid." "Better a blackout than a mind wipe," Zara replied. He hesitated a moment, then pressed the trigger. The explosion was silent, a wave of electromagnetic distortion that rippled through the air like invisible thunder. Lights flickered, went dark. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, the emergency systems rebooted. Bond turned toward Zara, but she was gone. He heard movement. Soft footsteps behind him. He spun, and there she was. Zara, standing by the far console, eyes vacant, gun raised. "Zara? You shouldn't have come here, James." Her voice was hollow, mechanical. You can't fight what you can't remember. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Bond dove sideways. The bullet grazed his shoulder. He rolled, slammed his elbow into the server base, and knocked the gun from her hand. She struck back with a precision that wasn't hers, fluid, merciless, almost machine-like. Bond blocked, twisted, countered with a hook to the jaw, but she didn't feel pain. He disarmed her only to find her reach for a hidden blade, slashing upward in a whirlwind motion. Bond caught her wrist, turning her momentum, and pinned her to the wall, breathing hard. "Zara, it's me. Listen to me." She struggled, voice cracking between static bursts. "They're in my head, James. I can't." He touched the small neural chip interface behind her ear, glowing faintly. A fail-safe. He ripped the emergency jammer from his belt and pressed it to the chip. Sparks flew. Zara screamed, then collapsed, unconscious in his arms. Bond held her close for a moment, eyes burning with restrained fury. "I'll get you back," he whispered. Then, from the speakers above, a voice. Cold. Measured. Familiar. "I told you, Mr. Bond. You can't erase an equation once it's written in human memory." It was Dravik. Alive. Inside MI6's systems. Screens around the chamber flickered to life, Dravik's face materializing in fragments of digital static. "You broke into your own house, Bond. Clever, but pointless. The shadow equation was never about control. It's about replacement." "You've turned agents into puppets," Bond snarled. "No, into vessels," Dravik said calmly. "Your agency stores millions of classified memories. With my algorithm, I can overwrite them all, make every operative in the world forget who they serve. And when the dust settles, they'll remember only one directive." He smiled. "Mine." Bond fired at the screen, shattering it. Zara groaned softly as she regained consciousness. "He's in the neural grid. If we don't purge him now, he'll rewrite MI6 from the inside out." Bond looked toward the shattered console, calculating. "Then we pull the plug on the entire system." They made their way to the reactor hub beneath the data chamber, the very heart of MI6's digital core. Sparks danced from overloaded panels. Flames licked at the metal frames as systems began to fail. Zara coughed through the smoke. "You do realize this could erase everything. Field records, agent files, even our own identities." Bond loaded a fresh mag into his pistol. "Then let's make sure we erase the right ghosts." They reached the main reactor. Bond entered the override code manually, each key echoing like a heartbeat. 10 seconds to full system reset. Zara looked up at him, her eyes steady again. "James, if this doesn't work, then we'll forget together," he said simply. The countdown hit 0. The building shuddered as energy flooded outward, a blinding surge that consumed every light, every sound, every trace of data. The shadow equation burned itself out in the firestorm, leaving behind only silence. When the light faded, Bond found himself on the floor of the ruined data wing. The monitors were dark, smoke curling around twisted steel. Zara stirred beside him, eyes blinking back to life. "Did we stop it?" Bond looked toward the blackened console. "For now." He stood, limping toward the shattered window overlooking the river. London was still there, still alive. But the reflection in the glass showed a different kind of shadow, one he couldn't shake. "The equation may be gone," Zara said softly, but the man who wrote it isn't. Bond's eyes hardened. Then it's time we finish the formula. Svalbard Archipelago, Norway, 3 weeks later. The Arctic wind screamed across the white wasteland like a living thing. The world here was frozen, endless, snow stretching to the horizon under a sky painted with pale aurora. In this silence stood a facility carved into the side of a glacier, a former NATO research outpost, now reborn as something darker. This was where Dravik had vanished, where the shadow equation would rise again. A black stealth transport skimmed across the ice, landing on retractable skids. Its ramp lowered, and James Bond stepped out, his breath ghosting in the cold. He was dressed in tactical snow gear, matte white armor blending with the tundra. His eyes were hidden behind dark goggles, but the set of his jaw was pure steel. Behind him, Zara followed, fully recovered but bearing the faint scar of the neural chip at her temple. "Temperature, -26, she muttered. "Welcome to paradise." Bond cracked the faintest smile. At least no traffic. They trudged toward the ridge overlooking the facility. Below them, drones patrolled the perimeter in slow arcs. Through binoculars, Bond saw the faint red pulse of laser sensors and the glint of automated turrets under the ice. "He's built his new kingdom well," Zara whispered. "Not well enough," Bond replied. At 0200 hours, the assault began. Bond and Zara descended the ridge, moving with ghost-like precision. Snow muffled every step. At the first checkpoint, Bond knelt beside a frozen vent shaft. He unrolled a compact cylinder, a thermal microbore drill. The tip glowed red as it melted through reinforced ice, opening a narrow entrance into the ventilation grid. Bond slid inside first, dropping silently into the dark. Inside, the air was metallic and cold. Red emergency lights flickered along the tunnel. He crawled until he reached a grate overlooking a wide operations bay, filled with engineers, soldiers, and scientists moving around glowing data screens. At the center stood Dravik, encased in an armored exosuit of polished silver, cables feeding into the massive reactor core behind him. His voice echoed through the speakers, calm and methodical. "Today, we transcend the human flaw, memory. With this iteration, the shadow equation will no longer erase minds, it will rewrite them." Bond's grip on the grate tightened. He whispered into his mic. "Target sighted. Level 3, center platform. Security count, 15 hostiles, 4 drones." Zara's voice crackled softly in his ear. "EMP pulse ready on your mark. 3, 2, 1, now." The lights flickered, then died. Bond dropped from the vent like a shadow descending from the ceiling, landing between 2 guards. Before they could react, he struck, a palm heel to the first man's throat, a low sweep that sent the second crashing into a console. The room erupted in chaos. Bullets sparked through the dark. Bond rolled behind a server rack, fired 3 suppressed rounds, each one precise, lethal. Zara entered from the opposite side, throwing a flash pellet. It exploded in white light, blinding the soldiers. "You!" Dravik shouted, turning as Bond emerged from the smoke. "I told you, Bond, you can't destroy an equation. You're just one of its variables." "Then consider me the error," Bond replied coldly, and charged. Dravik detached from the reactor, stepping forward. His exosuit hummed, hydraulic joints glowing. Each movement was amplified, fast, brutal, mechanical. He swung a backhand that would have shattered a man's skull. Bond ducked. The blow whistled past, crushing a steel console. Bond countered with a sharp roundhouse kick to Dravik's ribs, but the impact barely made him flinch. Dravik seized Bond by the collar, lifting him off the ground like a rag doll, and hurled him across the platform. Bond crashed into a steel railing, groaned, and rolled aside just as Dravik's fist smashed down, splitting the floor. Sparks erupted. "You're obsolete, Bond," Dravik roared. "A relic of the analog world." Bond spat blood, smirked. "Funny. I've been hearing that since 1962. He grabbed a loose cable from the reactor housing and whipped it forward. It wrapped around Dravik's wrist. Bond yanked it toward an exposed conduit, electrocuting him with a surge of white-blue light. Dravik howled, tearing the cable free, smoke rising from the scorched metal of his suit. Bond lunged, a flurry of precision strikes. Elbow hook to the jaw, low knee jab to the thigh joint, a 45-degree spin kick to the chest plate, sending Dravik staggering. Dravik countered with an overhand blow that Bond barely dodged, the fist smashing through the floor behind him. "You can't win, Bond," Dravik bellowed. "Winning's overrated," Bond said. "Survival will do." They clashed again, raw strength versus human will. Bond ducked under a wild swing, rolled behind, and jammed a magnetic charge onto the exosuit's spine. "Goodbye, Doctor." He kicked Dravik backward, just as the charge exploded. The blast sent both men flying. Dravik crashed against the reactor core, sparks bursting from his suit as the containment glass behind him fractured. Bond struggled to his feet, panting. "Zara, detonate the sequence. Now. What about you?" "I'll improvise." Zara's voice echoed through the intercom. "Activating Shadow Burn Protocol. 5 minutes to meltdown." Bond limped toward Dravik, who was half-pinned under a fallen beam. The scientist's face was pale, twisted with rage. "You think you've won, Bond? The equation isn't a virus. It's a philosophy. It will be rewritten again, by someone smarter, someone stronger." Bond looked down at him, cold, calm. "Then let's make sure they start from zero." He pulled the pin from a second explosive charge and placed it beside the reactor's fusion core. "For what it's worth," Bond added, "you were right about one thing." "And what's that?" Dravik rasped. "Some memories deserve to be erased." He turned and walked away as the alarms screamed. Dravik's last shout was lost in the rising roar of the collapsing facility. Bond sprinted down the access tunnel, flames chasing him as pipes burst overhead. The heat from the core melted sections of the ice, flooding the corridors. Zara appeared at the far end, holding the escape hatch open. "Move, James." He dove through the door as the shockwave hit, the entire glacier erupting in white fire behind them. The explosion tore through the ice, sending a tower of steam and debris into the air. The night sky glowed red, then faded into silence. They lay on the frozen ground, breathing hard. The facility was gone, buried beneath the Arctic Sea. Zara turned to him, trembling. "It's over." Bond stared into the horizon, the dawn breaking faintly beyond the mountains. "Nothing's ever over," he said quietly. "But for now, it's quiet." She smiled faintly. "You really think you can erase ghosts?" Bond looked at her, and for once, there was something softer in his eyes. "No. But you can learn to live with them." The Thames glistened under morning light. Inside MI6, reconstruction was underway, burned-out floors replaced, new security systems humming. Em stood by the window, hands clasped behind her back. Bond entered, wearing a dark suit, the cold of the Arctic still lingering in his demeanor. "You saved the service again, 007, Em said quietly. "But I imagine the paperwork won't reflect half of it." "That's the beauty of bureaucracy," Bond replied. "You save the world, and they send you a bill." She smiled faintly. "Dravik's files were incomplete, but we recovered fragments. It seems he wasn't working alone." Bond raised an eyebrow. "Meaning, Mr. Bond," she said, handing him a dossier stamped classified, level Omega. "There's another equation." He took the file, eyes narrowing slightly. "Then it seems my holiday will have to wait." As he turned to leave, Em called out softly, "Be careful, James. The ghosts we erase have a habit of returning." Bond paused, glanced back with that familiar, wry glint. "Then I'll keep the light on for them." He walked down the hall, fading into shadow as the screen of London's skyline reflected across the glass.